Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And I am Matthew.
He had to think about that for a minute. Who am I today?
Who am I today?
Oh my. It just reminds me of Alice in Wonderland when Alice says, "I'm afraid I cannot explain myself, sir, because I am not myself, you see." Anyway.
Who are you feeling like?
Oh dear. Forging forth, and speaking of the 60s, let's get into this one.
Oh yeah, we're doing a show.
That's right.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
In Los Angeles, California, in the autumn of 1969, along winding Mulholland Drive, a young woman's body was discovered, brutally stabbed more than 150 times. Her identity shrouded in mystery for nearly half a century. This Jane Doe, known only as Case Number 59, would lie nameless for the next 46 years, her story untold and her family unaware of her tragic fate. In a chilling twist, the proximity of her remains to the infamous Tate-LaBianca murder scenes led investigators down a twisted path of speculation. The brutal nature of the crime sparked whispers of a possible connection to one of America's most notorious cults, the Manson Family. It wasn't until 2016 that modern forensic techniques finally gave her a name. Reet Silvia Jurvetson, a 19-year-old from Montreal who had ventured to L.A. with dreams as big as the Hollywood sign. Despite her identity now being known, Reet Jurvetson's murder remains unsolved. Her family is still hoping for answers more than 55 years later. This is Dark Poutine episode 358, Made in Canada, The Unsolved Murder of Reet Jurvetson. On November 16, 1969, the tranquility of Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles was shattered by a grim discovery. A 15-year-old boy, Trevor Santocci, out birdwatching in the area, stumbled upon a site at Mulholland and Beaumont Drive near Laurel Canyon. There, partially concealed in dense brush just 15 feet down a steep ravine, lay the body of a young woman. Years later, Santocci described what he'd seen to NBC Los Angeles. Quote, "It's something you never forget," he said. "I looked over the side of Mulholland Drive and saw a body that was contorted." Trevor's mind immediately went to the recent Tate-LaBianca murders nearby. Quote, "People were going into houses and killing people, and nobody knew why, so everybody was spooked at the time." End quote. The unidentified victim, who authorities dubbed Jane Doe case number 59, appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s, and she'd been brutally murdered. Her body, fully clothed, was caught on a tree branch that prevented her from tumbling further into the 699-foot deep canyon below. The scene was one of horrific violence. The young woman had been stabbed an astounding 157 times, primarily in the neck, chest, and torso. The frenzied nature of the attack was shocking to the seasoned detectives. The wounds to her neck were so numerous and severe that they initially appeared to be one gaping injury. Investigators surveyed the crime scene, and they noted several crucial details. Rigor mortis was beginning to leave the young woman's head, face, and neck, indicating she had been killed within the previous 48 hours. Her body position was as follows: her right leg crossed over her left at the knee, her left arm bent behind her back, her palm facing upward, and her eyes wide open. The 112-pound body showed signs of having been transported in a car, dragged out, and then rolled down the hill where it came to rest around the trunk of a tree. A tag in her jacket read, "Made in Canada." The autopsy, conducted the following day by Dr. Gaston Herrera from the LA County Mortuary, revealed the full extent of the brutality. Stab wounds were to the chest and to the abdomen, and some to the hands, suggesting the victim had fought desperately for her life. The murder weapon was determined to be a single, common penknife, and the killer was likely right-handed. Her stomach contents indicated that she had been killed approximately 2 hours after eating a meal. The body of another young woman, also murdered, had been found a few hundred meters away nearly a year earlier. Although the term serial killer had yet to be coined, investigators of Jane Doe 59's murder were concerned that the same killer might be responsible.
It's really eerie that there's so many crimes sort of clustered in this area.
Yeah.
You know, LA at the time really became, there's a pattern of fear in LA.
Yeah, absolutely, especially after the Manson murders.
Yeah.
It sort of continued on into the 70s and even early 80s. There were hillside stranglings, and there was the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. It just goes on and on.
Yeah.
The young woman found in January of 1969 was Marina Elizabeth Habba, a 17-year-old student. She was brutally murdered in late December 1968. Marina Elizabeth Habba was born in Germany on February 23, 1951, to an intriguing pair of parents, Hans Habba, a prolific writer and war hero, and Eloise Hart, a B-movie actress. As the child of this unlikely couple, Marina grew up in a world of privilege and creativity. Her parents divorced when she was young, and, with her father Hans moving to Switzerland and remarrying, Marina remained in the care of her mother in Los Angeles. Despite her Hollywood upbringing, Marina was described as a shy, quiet, and moral Catholic girl. She graduated from University High School in West Los Angeles in June 1968 and attended the University of Hawaii as a freshman. Standing 5'3" with blue eyes and black hair, Marina was known for her beauty and gentle demeanor. She had artistic aspirations and was considered by friends to be very quiet. Unlike many of her peers in the Hollywood scene, Marina didn't smoke or drink, setting her apart as a conscientious young woman in the turbulent late 1960s.
Yeah, I've always found the mid to late 60s, just before I was born, fascinating. There always seems to be this stark divide in my head between people who embrace counterculture and then those who actually actively avoided it. It seems like there's like two camps in the world at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Yeah.
Like now, I mean, it was a very divisive time in history, really. There were a lot of strong opinions on different sides, aspects of the political spectrum.
I think my mother was definitely not counterculture. So while everyone was listening to Jim Morrison, she was listening to like Jan and Dean and the Beach Boys.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with Jan and Dean and the Beach Boys. And the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, if you listen, is pretty trippy. Anyway, on December 29th, Marina went on a date with her friend John Hornberg, and they spent the evening at the Troubadour nightclub with other couples before returning to John's home. Marina left John's house around 3:15 a.m. on December 30th to drive back to her mother's home in West Hollywood. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Marina's mother was awakened by a loud muffler. She looked out the window to see Marina's car in the driveway alongside a black sedan. A man in his early 20s was seen near Marina's car before jumping into the sedan and speeding away. Marina's mother found her daughter's car keys inside the vehicle, but Marina was nowhere to be found. She reported Marina missing to the police at 3:45 a.m. 2 days later, on January 1st, 1969, Marina's body was discovered in a ravine off Mulholland Drive. She had been brutally attacked, suffered stab wounds, a slashed throat, and severe blunt force trauma. The autopsy revealed that Marina had likely been held captive for some time before her death, as partially digested food was found in her stomach. The investigation into Marina's murder proved challenging. Over the years, detectives have explored various leads, including the possibility of involvement by the suspected serial killer known as the Co-Ed Killer, Edmund Kemper, an outlaw biker named Spanky, and even members of the notorious Manson family. Marina's connections to the Los Angeles music scene and her proximity to the areas frequented by the Manson family raised questions about potential links to her murder. Despite extensive efforts, Marina Habba's case remains unsolved. While investigating Jane Doe 59's murder in November, the infamous Tate-LaBianca murders, which had occurred in early August 1969 at the hands of members of Charles Manson's family, were still fresh in the minds of LA homicide investigators. The parallels to the murders of Marina Habba and Jane Doe 59 stood out starkly, in particular the level of violence. For those who need a refresher, the Tate-LaBianca murders began on the night of August 8th and 9th, 1969, when 4 individuals entered the home of actress Sharon Tate at 10,050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon. They brutally murdered Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant, along with 4 others: celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, heiress Abigail Folger, aspiring screenwriter Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent, a friend of the property's caretaker. Sharon Tate's husband, director Roman Polanski, was away at the time. The killers stabbed the victims multiple times, leaving a horrific scene, and wrote "pig" in Sharon Tate's blood on the front door.
Yeah. This, I think maybe it's almost the way that Mansons did this and who they did this to was almost like sheer theatricality in a way of murdering. Right?
This is why Bugliosi, the prosecuting attorney later on, believed, due to his investigation, that Manson had wanted the crimes to be shocking,
right,
to start this race war, this helter-skelter race war,
right,
with people coming after the black community for doing it.
Wow. And that's not talked about very often anymore,
No.
When they talk about Manson, they don't talk about sort of the whole racist part of this as well, right?
Some people believe that is not accurate. For example, on Alan R. Warren's radio show, I spoke with journalist Tom O'Neill, whose book Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s, published in 2019, challenges the official narrative of the Manson family murders. And this book and its subsequent Netflix documentary adaptation, which just dropped, explore O'Neill's decades-long investigation into potential links between Manson and covert government programs like MKUltra. O'Neill argues that Manson may have been an unwitting or protected participant in CIA mind control experiments, suggesting that authorities deliberately mishandled the case to obscure deeper connections. The work raises questions about law enforcement's failures, media manipulation, and whether Manson's influence was amplified through clandestine means, though it stops short of definitive conclusions. I think O'Neill does a good job of researching this, and he does bring a lot of things into question. So have a read of that book.
And the Manson murders, we still talk about it now. At the time, it overshadowed almost everything else happening in LA when it happened, right?
Right.
Like this became the thing that was on everybody's lips.
So for context, how long we've been talking about it? I was born 3 days before it happened.
Okay.
So
and we're still talking about it.
And we're still talking about it. And that's almost 56 years later.
Wow.
Yeah. So the night after the Cielo Drive murders, August 9th and 10th, 1969, a second pair of murders occurred. The perpetrators struck again at 3301 Waverly Drive in the Los Feliz area of Los Angeles. This time, the victims were Lino LaBianca, a grocery store executive, and his wife Rosemary. The couple was tied up and stabbed numerous times. The killers carved war into Lino's abdomen and left messages written in blood on the walls, including "Death to Pigs" and the misspelled "Helter Skelter." The connection between the Tate and LaBianca murders and Charles Manson's family was not immediately apparent. In October 1969, Manson and several of his followers were arrested at Barker Ranch in Death Valley on suspicion of auto theft. While in custody, Susan Atkins, one of Manson's most ardent followers, began boasting to her cellmates about her involvement in the Tate murders. Both Marina Habba and Jane Doe No. 59's brutally slain bodies were found only a few miles from the location of the Cielo Drive crime scene, 5.8 miles or 9.3 kilometers as the crow flies. Although Charlie was in jail at the time of Jane Doe 59's murder, some members of the Manson family still roaming free were actively recruiting new members. Adding to the intrigue, a caretaker at Spahn Ranch, the Manson family's primary residence, told police that Jane Doe 59 resembled a woman named Sherry who had spent time at the ranch. For decades, the woman was informally known as Sherry Doe.
This tendency to assign nicknames to Jane Does can kind of create more mystery than clarity. Like, why are they creating a name for her?
There was a murder victim who was called Orange Socks.
Yeah.
They gave her a Jane Doe name, case number.
Right.
But at the same time, Jane Doe dehumanizes in a way. And so maybe if you can connect a tiny bit of a thing to them, you know, like give her some sort of name. I see it as people trying to humanize the victim a little more.
Don't you think, though, that creating the term Jane Doe was actually about not dehumanizing them, not calling them case number 1, 2, 3?
It is. Yeah. But, you know, giving them more of a nickname.
But they don't know who they are.
Yeah, I know. It's awful.
Right?
Yeah, it just is awful. I just think it gives them a bit of identity. Anyway, earlier victim Marina Habba's world overlapped geographically with the Manson family's in several significant ways. She lived near the Whiskey A Go-Go, a popular hangout for the group, and resided startlingly close to Charles Tex Watson, a key member of the family, and also now a convicted murderer in the Tate-LaBianca murders. The location where Marina's body was discovered also aligned with routes frequently used by the Manson family as they traveled between their base at Spahn Ranch and Sunset Boulevard. Socially, Marina moved in circles that intersected with the Manson family's network. She had dated Keller Gordon, whose sister Kim Gordon, later of Sonic Youth fame, knew Bobby Beausoleil, a Manson associate. Marina had also attended the same high school as Patricia Krenwinkel, another notorious member of the family, and also now convicted of the Tate-LaBianca murders. Although these connections are circumstantial, they're kind of significant. Make of it what you will. As the investigation into Marina's murder unfolded, law enforcement began to focus on the Manson family as potential suspects. Detectives noted similarities between the weapons used in Marina's killing and those employed in the infamous Tate-LaBianca murders. Moreover, like Reet Jurvetson, Jane Doe 59, Marina fits the profile of individuals the family was known to target for recruitment: young, affluent, and frequenting areas around the Sunset Strip where the group often sought new members. Immediately following the discovery of Jane Doe 59's body, detectives at the Los Angeles Police Department employed the standard identification techniques available to them. They meticulously documented the victim's physical characteristics, noting her height, weight, eye color, and distinctive features such as vaccination scars on her left arm and thigh, a small horizontal scar on her left breast, and a birthmark on her right buttocks. These details, and others like her dental records, were recorded hoping to match a missing persons report or that she be recognized by someone searching for a lost loved one.
It's really interesting how, if you think about this, Mike, this might sound really weird, but bear with me. Way back when there were, 1 million people on the planet, right?
Yeah.
They'd be like, somebody was murdered. They'd be like, oh, that's Joe, because everyone knew him, right? And then there's like forensic technology happened as population increased, right? And as not everyone knew everyone. And it's really interesting how as we grow as a planet with the sheer number of people, the forensic technology, like now DNA, to figure out who people are sort of grew with the population. Do you think that's weird? I think that's interesting.
It's fascinating. The investigators also turned to forensic artists to create composite sketches of the victim. These drawings were distributed to the public and law enforcement agencies to generate leads. However, as later revealed by the victim's sister, Anne Jurvetson, these initial sketches were clearly inaccurate and, quote, did not resemble her in the least. This inaccuracy likely hampered early identification efforts, as potential witnesses or family members may not have recognized the woman from these drawings. In addition to visual representations, investigators cataloged the clothing and jewelry found on Jane Doe 59's body. Going so far as to take pictures of them displayed on a mannequin, they hoped these items might be distinctive enough to jog someone's memory or be recognized by those who knew the victim. The young woman's dental records were also carefully examined and documented, with investigators noting the presence of silver amalgam fillings in her upper and lower jaw. In an era before centralized databases, these records could potentially be matched against dental records if a missing persons case was ever brought forward. Despite these efforts, the case went cold, and the young woman remained unidentified for decades. Jane Doe 59's body was cremated and buried in what has been called a, quote, pauper's grave. It wasn't until 2003 that a significant step forward was taken when an LAPD detective submitted biological evidence to be uploaded to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NAMUS. On January 25, 1971, Charles Manson and 3 of his female disciples, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten, still considered potentially connected to the Jane Doe and Marina Habba killings, were found guilty on all 27 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to murder for the infamous Tate-LaBianca killings. This verdict came after an intense 9-day deliberation by the jury lasting nearly 43 hours. On March 29, 1971, the jury returned death penalty verdicts for all 4 defendants on all counts. Judge Charles H. Older formalized these sentences on April 19, 1971, condemning Manson and the 3 women to death. However, this sentence would not stand for long.
Yeah, it was essentially, this is a formality, right? Like, it's going to be overturned very soon. So.
Yeah. Manson's legal troubles didn't end there, though. In a separate trial later in 1971, he was convicted for the murders of Gary Hinman and Donald Shorty Shea, adding another life sentence to his record. October of the same year saw Charles Tex Watson, another key Manson follower, convicted on 7 counts of first-degree murder for his role in the Tate-LaBianca killings. A significant twist came on February 18, 1972, when the California Supreme Court declared the death penalty unconstitutional. This ruling automatically commuted the sentences of Manson and his followers to life in prison. In his 1974 book, Helter Skelter, former Manson prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi suggested that Jane Doe No. 59 might have been killed because she may have witnessed the murder of John Philip Hott 11 days before the discovery of her body. Hott was initially thought to have died by suicide while playing Russian roulette with Manson family members with a suspiciously fully loaded revolver. The family were the only witnesses and said he'd killed himself. This theory speculated that Jane Doe 59 was silenced to prevent her from revealing information about Hott's death. However, LAPD investigators have found no direct evidence supporting this theory. As the years passed, the young woman's true identity remained hidden, her family unaware of her fate, but in 2016 a breakthrough would finally put a name to Jane Doe number 59, Reet Silvia Jurvetson from Montreal, opening up new avenues of investigation and raising even more questions about her tragic end. More after a quick break. And we are back at the halfway point. Matthew, thoughts so far?
What, do you think if Charlie Manson had been sentenced to death and was killed soon after that, that this sort of holding on to this story would have gone away faster? Or do you think that would have created more sort of intrigue about the entire thing?
Honestly, I think it was Charlie's life in prison and his antics that garnered all the attention, really, afterward. I mean, I think the case might not have been as front of mind.
Right.
It still would have been a crazy thing to have happened.
Right.
But it wouldn't have been as, because he would have been gone much sooner.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been the controversy around, should we release these ladies and that kind of thing. I mean, people are out on parole now, which is interesting. I don't think Tex Watson is ever going to get out on parole, but
no.
But it is what it is. Trying to solve some of the 11,000 unsolved murders in Los Angeles, LAPD Detective Cliff Shepard was assigned to the LAPD Cold Case Squad to take another look at some of these crimes. It was in an evidentiary warehouse belonging to the city where Shepard stumbled onto the case of Jane Doe number 59 in 2003. Inside an evidence box belonging to the cold case was a bra that had been soaked in the blood of the murder victim from more than 4 decades ago. Detective Shepard recognized the critical importance of the blood evidence, as it allowed for DNA testing, an investigative technique that was not available at the time of the murder. He understood that if a DNA profile could be developed from the blood, it could be entered in the databases, potentially leading to a match if any family members were searching for the victim and had submitted their own DNA for comparison. Following this realization, Shepard sent DNA results obtained from the blood on the victim's bra to various databases across the U.S. In an effort to generate new leads, he also circulated a color post-mortem photograph for the first time. However, both law enforcement and media outlets appeared hesitant to publish such a graphic image of an unidentified deceased person. Unfortunately, the case of Jane Doe 59 did not garner significant interest from the authorities. Detective Shepard noted that there were several other unidentified female cases at the time which may have contributed to the lack of focus on this particular victim. Despite having her DNA profile available in databases, no identification was made and the case remained unsolved. As time passed, the investigation stretched into its 5th decade. In 2012, Cliff Shepard retired from the Los Angeles Police Department, leaving behind the unsolved case of Jane Doe 59. Although Shepard was no longer actively working on the investigation, the case continued to occupy his thoughts. The turning point came in June 2015 when a friend of the Jurvetson family in Canada was browsing the nameless website. Among the countless faces of the unidentified, the friend stumbled upon the post-mortem photograph that bore a striking resemblance to Reet Jurvetson, a young woman who had vanished decades earlier. This chance discovery set in motion a chain of events that would finally bring answers to Reet's family. Upon recognizing the photograph, the family friend reached out to Reet's sister, Anne, sharing their suspicion about the possible connection. Moved by this potential lead, Anne took action and contacted Nameless directly. Her inquiry prompted the LAPD to reopen the investigation, breathing new life into a case that had long gone cold. The next step in the identification process involved obtaining DNA samples from Jurvetson family members. These samples were then meticulously compared to the DNA evidence that had been preserved from Jane Doe 59. In December 2015, after weeks of anxious waiting, the results came back with a definitive answer. The DNA testing confirmed a very strong family linkage between the samples and Jane Doe 59, finally putting a name to the unidentified victim. The Jurvetson family was officially informed of the DNA match in December 2015, bringing a bittersweet end to decades of uncertainty. However, this information was not made public out of respect for the family's privacy and to allow further investigation until April 2016. During this time, Ann Jurvetson provided investigators with additional details about her sister's life, hoping to aid the ongoing investigation and potentially shed light on the circumstances surrounding Reet's murder. The identification process also revealed some surprising discrepancies. Ann Jurvetson noted that the original forensic sketches of Jane Doe 59 were inaccurate and bore little resemblance to her sister, explaining in part why the family had not recognized Reet in previous public appeals for information. The coroner's report provided grim details about Reet's death, revealing that she had been stabbed more than 150 times, 157 total, with no traces of drugs or alcohol in her system.
157 times.
With a jackknife kind of thing.
What I find interesting about this is this talking about how the initial sketch was way off, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes sketches are totally on the mark, right? Like I've seen sketches done, and then you look at the criminal, you're like, wow, it looks exactly like that person, right?
Like the one of Paul Bernardo. As the Scarborough rapist.
Looked exactly like him, right?
Looked exactly like him.
But then you get really bad sketches sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, look up Jocelyn Park if you're listening to this. She's the sketch artist that did that. It was Google Jocelyn Park worst ID sketch ever. And it almost looks like just a line cartoon, like children's drawing of a guy. But it actually captured him because the guy actually looked exactly like it.
Oh yes.
The one, with the pointy chin. It's so funny. Jocelyn Park, worst ID sketch ever, and it actually caught him. Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It's like, how did it catch that guy? But it looks exactly like him.
Then you look at him, you're like, okay, yeah.
It's him. One of the most poignant aspects of the case was the revelation that the Jurvetson family had never reported Reet missing. They believed she was, quote, just living her life somewhere and would eventually contact them, a heartbreaking misconception that had persisted for decades. Reet Silvia Jurvetson entered the world as the youngest member of her family on September 23, 1950, in Sweden. Born to Estonian refugees who had fled their homeland in 1944 during the tumultuous years of World War II, Reet's early life was marked by displacement and transition. In 1951, the family embarked on a new chapter, immigrating to Canada in search of stability and opportunity. Montreal, Quebec became the backdrop for Reet's formative years, and she grew up in this vibrant city, blossoming into a lovely, free-spirited, and joyful young woman. Her involvement in Girl Guides and participation in a youth choir spoke to her diverse interests and social nature. Both family and friends held Reet in deep affection, cherishing her presence in their lives. Reet's artistic inclinations were evident from an early age. She possessed a talent for drawing and often channeled her creativity into sewing her own clothes. However, her home life was not without its challenges. As Reet entered her teenage years, a sense of adventure began to stir her. According to her family, a certain naivety and inherent trust in others tempered this newfound desire for freedom. As a teenager, she rebelled against a strict family environment centered around the church. At 16, Reet ran away from home, and by 18, she'd moved to Toronto, living with her grandmother first, but eventually living with a boyfriend. In Toronto, she secured employment with Canada Post. According to the Fifth Estate episode about Reet, Ilmi Seaman, a friend and confidant, recalled her as a vibrant and vivacious individual. She described Reet's personality as full of life, always seeking laughter and enjoyment. Reet had a deep love for animals and life. According to her friend, Gilda Green, also in the Fifth Estate, Reet exhibited a fearless attitude toward her future. Having finished high school and reached an age of independence, Reet felt empowered to pursue her desires and explore the world without restraint. Reet had a brother living in Arizona and began planning a visit to see him. Her itinerary included a stopover in Los Angeles. In the fall of 1969, at 19, Reet embarked on what would be her final journey. What initially appeared to be a brief visit soon took on the semblance of a more permanent arrangement. She arrived in L.A. toward the end of the summer of 1969, a time that marked the culmination of a decade celebrated for peace and love, but was also known for darker things. Her family received a postcard bearing news of her contentment, mentioning a lovely apartment in Los Angeles, reassuring them not to worry. However, the precise details of her living situation during this time have been lost to history. The building has been torn down, etc., etc.
I got a letter from my grandmother 2 weeks after she died.
Oh, wow.
I was living in Moscow and she mailed it. And I just thinking of like the family getting this postcard likely sent just days before she was murdered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just living your life not knowing that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
So sad.
It's really sad. Other than the postcard, there was no more communication from Reet. Her family made attempts to reach out, but their efforts proved futile. Initially, they rationalized her silence as a young woman's quest for independence, patiently awaiting her eventual contact. As months stretched into years, they clung to the hope that Reet was carving out a new life for herself somewhere. Reet's mother, ever hopeful, maintained regular contact with friends, seeking the tiniest morsel of information about her daughter's whereabouts or well-being. The family held on to the belief that Reet would eventually reconnect with her loved ones, yet as time passed, no new information surfaced, leaving them in a state of prolonged uncertainty. Despite the silence from their daughter, the thought that Reet might have met a tragic end did not cross their minds. No parent or family member really wants to go there. Initially, Reet's family made efforts to locate her through informal channels. Her uncle Tonu, who resided in the U.S., enlisted the help of a family friend in Los Angeles to inquire at Reet's last known address. As time passed without news, the family reportedly hired a private investigator to search for Reet. The decision not to notify police was rooted in the social norms of the time, over 5 decades ago. The family and their social circle didn't consider contacting law enforcement as a standard procedure for locating a missing person. They believed police involvement was primarily for criminal matters, not for finding a young woman with an adventurous spirit who could have been traveling or living anywhere. Despite their growing concern, the family's efforts to find Reet were limited by their understanding of conducting such a search. They believed that hiring the private investigator was the most appropriate course of action.
Why do you think they thought that?
I don't really know. I mean, I read their website, and it didn't really come across to me why.
Right.
And I think it was like, you have to know the individual that you're looking for. We don't know Reet. We don't know what she was like. Her family did, and they made their decisions based on what they knew about her as an individual. It's super easy for people who have no clue about Reet as a person, like us, to sit here and speculate about why people made such decisions 55 years ago. Doesn't make really a lot of sense for us to do that. We want to know where she is, but we don't want to upset anybody, you know? So let's hire this private investigator to look into it. But the private investigator didn't find anything because there was nothing to find because she wasn't living.
It's very Canadian. Let's look into this without upsetting anybody.
Yeah. And I'm not judging them for doing that.
No, not at all. I get it. I was just asking the question.
Yeah.
Of like, it's just interesting. Like,
people's motives for doing things around a disappearance or even a murder, different people react differently to different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reet's friends and family in Canada unanimously agreed that the investigator should first look into Reet's newfound love interest. This individual, known as Jean or John, had met Reet in a cafe in Montreal, and she'd become infatuated with him. Jean was described as a doppelganger for the 1960s rock icon Jim Morrison, which added to Reet's attraction given her admiration for the musician. Reet's infatuation with Jean was so intense that she made plans to follow him to Los Angeles. That's why she was going there before going to Arizona to see her brother. Initially, she considered hitchhiking, but her friends discouraged this dangerous idea. Eventually, Reet decided to take a bus to L.A., leaving behind her strict upbringing and family to pursue Jean. Detectives sought to determine where Reet had lived in Los Angeles, and she told friends it was in Hollywood, in a 4-story building next to a movie studio. Coincidentally, Reet's sister discovered that postcard they'd received when Reet first arrived, revealing her return address as 5311 Melrose Avenue. This building, once the Paramount Hotel, was located right next to Paramount Studios and had been converted into apartments by 1969. One of these apartments was apparently rented to a man from Montreal named Jean, and Reet soon joined him in apartment 306.
The one thing that all of this is, LA just feels so vast, and there just seems like LA's this vast place. And,
it really is. Yeah.
And I've always felt it like this sort of, it's not my favorite city. It just feels sort of vast and chaotic to me.
I think that's what I like about it, though.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. See, me personally, I love it. I love Los Angeles, just for the weird pockets of different places and things, and it's like culturally, it's all over the place. It's all over the place, and that's what I love about it. I like its chaos. I love its chaos.
You're a chaos monster.
Reet's friend Gilda Green recalled an accidental meeting with a mutual friend from L.A. who mentioned that Reet had stayed with them for 2 weeks before leaving on her own, seemingly happy. However, they had lost track of her after that. On the family's website dedicated to Reet and the search for information about her, Linda Ole, Reet's niece, emphasized that discussions about Reet's disappearance continued for many years within the family. She personally witnessed numerous conversations on the topic even as a teenager. These discussions often concluded with the belief that, quote, the detective found nothing, and expressions of wonder at how Reet had seemingly vanished. Reet's niece, Linda, also stressed that the family genuinely believed they had done everything possible to find Reet. She wanted to convey that Reet was deeply loved and missed. Finding the mysterious Jean or John became a top priority for Detective Lou Rivera, who picked up where Cliff Shepard left off. Jean was not officially considered a suspect, but was deemed a person of interest central to the investigation. The only other person who might have known Jean was Paul Robert, an artist in the Montreal area who hadn't been seen or heard from in the past 10 years. In 2016, Paul Robert was located, still working as an artist in Montreal. He provided a description of Jean to a forensic artist, describing him as having an almost angelic face and always seeming ready to leave. Gilda Green also shared her recollections of Jean, contributing to creating a composite sketch. The first sketch depicted Jean, describing him as resembling Jim Morrison of The Doors, while a second sketch showed a possible associate with a Beatles-style haircut. The Los Angeles police released Jean's composite, hoping someone would recognize him. Despite the passage of time since November 1969, the knowledge of how Reet Jurvetson died made the events feel recent for those who loved her. Some people have speculated that Jean, or John, who Reet met in Montreal and traveled to L.A. to meet, may be John Hott, who died in the company of the Manson family members only days before Reet's body was discovered. While there's no concrete evidence linking the mysterious Jean or John that Reet Jurvetson went to meet in Los Angeles with John Hott, also known as Zero, it is a compelling theory. So his nickname was Zero.
Wow, there's 60s LA. Like there's so many assumed names and drifters and people coming out in and out. It'd be impossible to track people down.
But it's interesting that this Jean or John hasn't come forward, and you know, who knows? Maybe he was John Hott and he is dead.
Yeah,
you know,
maybe.
this person is dead. This person, and maybe it was actually the Manson family that murdered Reet. But like, there's no concrete evidence, so it's all just speculation. This is why I don't like unsolved things.
It's speculation.
Because we just speculate, and I don't want to add to the conversation of barking up the wrong tree, you know? That's what I'm always scared of with unsolved cases, is I don't want to send people off in the wrong direction. I really don't.
Because anything could happen. I was in college with a girl who had a boyfriend. It was it was an interesting kind of relationship, and he stopped calling her, and this is kind of before cell phones, and she'd call him and call him and call him. Yep. And years later, I said, whatever happened to, I can't remember his name, I'll call him John. She's like, 3 years later, I found out that when he was on vacation in Florida, he died in a jet ski accident.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't really know she didn't know his family or anything. It was just sort of like more casual, but she thought it was going somewhere, and she just thought she had been dumped, and he was dead the entire time. So you never know. You never know, right? Because things happen. Things happen, like, you know?
That's sad.
Yeah.
That's actually really
It is
sad.
really sad. Yeah.
Oh. It's important to note that while both Jean or John and John Hott are mentioned in connection with the case, there is no indication that they are the same person. The search for the man Jurvetson knew as Jean or John continues to be a key focus of the investigation into her murder, of course. If someone is still alive and knows something about what happened, they're not talking. Detectives have explored potential connections to other unsolved cases in the same period in the pursuit of leads. While initial speculation suggested a possible link to the Manson family murders due to the proximity, timing, and method of Jurvetson's death, investigators have found no concrete evidence to support this theory. Nevertheless, they have not entirely ruled out the possibility. In early 2016, detectives even interviewed Charles Manson himself, though this interaction yielded no helpful information. Charlie rarely ever did. The LAPD has been leveraging modern technology and forensic techniques in their investigation. They have been reviewing and reanalyzing physical evidence from the crime scene, including the blood-stained bra that was crucial in Reet Jurvetson's eventual identification. Investigators are hopeful that advances in forensic science might yet yield new clues that were not detectable with the technology available in 1969. Law enforcement has been actively engaging with the public to generate new leads. The case has received renewed media attention, including a documentary by CBC's The Fifth Estate titled Who Killed Jane Doe 59. This increased publicity has been aimed at jogging memories and encouraging individuals with potential information to come forward.
Yeah, and this, just like us.
Yeah.
Dark poutine coverage. You know,
Well, this is why we do
some more info, right?
This is why we do an unsolved case. Because, you know, maybe Jean or Jean or whatever your name is listens to the show because he lives in Montreal again, you know, and he's like, holy crap, I wonder what happened to her. You know what I mean?
Is that your Quebecois accent?
It's a very terrible Quebec accent. But
it wasn't too bad. It's better than your other ones.
Stop it. I do some good.
Don't do him. Do not do him.
Okay. What do you mean?
Anyway.
I want to see the baby. Show me the baby.
Werner Herzog is your favorite one.
He really is. He is my favorite for a lot of reasons. However, I digress. On February 25th, 2019, in Season 3, Episode 15 of Investigation Discovery's People magazine investigates another similarly named documentary, Who Killed Jane Doe 59, was aired on Investigation Discovery. On November 25th, 2022, they re-aired that episode. So people are still interested. Even decades after her murder, Reet's case is still wide open, and investigators in LA are committed to finding out what happened to her. Reet Jurvetson's family back here in Canada remains committed to assisting authorities in resolving this tragic murder case. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 358, Made in Canada, The Unsolved Murder of Reet Jurvetson.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Dark Patin. Dark Patin.
Dark Patin.
Exactly. Here's our first voicemail.
Hi, this is Dave from Saskatoon. I just finished listening to the Toronto van attack, and I have to comment on, I've always had a problem with the sentencing for first-degree murder, is you can kill one person and get 25 years, or life without parole for 25 years, or you can kill 11 people and get the same sentence. Personally, I think they should get be like the United States that runs consecutively. Because to me, it only matters about one person, and the other, for that case, the other 10 people don't matter. But that's my opinion. Go take a shit in your hat.
Well, thanks, Dave. I don't know how you feel about that, Matthew. What are your thoughts?
You know, I actually have some sympathy for what he's saying. You know, it's a quandary, right? Because if I were a relative of one of the people murdered, I would
Do you want justice?
I want the full justice for my loved one. But I'm going to assume that as a legal case, it was considered one crime versus many crimes, maybe. But yeah, I kind of have some sympathy for what he's saying there. I don't know what the answer is, but
there have been cases where people have been sentenced to consecutive life terms here in Canada, but sometimes they don't stand up in the Court of Appeal because it's cruel and unusual or whatever. But at the same time,
but at the same time, mowing down 11 people is cruel and unusual.
Absolutely, it is.
Right, you're right.
100% it is. You are not going to get any disagreement from me.
Yeah.
I'm of like mind, to tell you the truth. If you do one murder, you go away for one murder. If you do 11, you should go away for 11.
I thought you were about to say, if you do the crime, you'll do the time.
That was in my head, but I didn't want to say that because it's a big dumb cliche. And, I should just have the words "big dumb cliche" written across my forehead. No, but backwards anyway, so I can see it in the mirror.
Exactly. So, but thanks for calling in with that.
Yeah, much appreciated.
It's a really important consideration.
What do you think Dave does there in Saskatoon, Matthew?
I don't know what he does in Saskatoon. I want to, I'm all for, right now, I'm thinking of summertime, and I'm thinking of like how I kind of wish I was back in the 70s. And I'm just going to say that Dave has a couple thousand acres of wheat fields.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So he can watch his dog run away for 3 days.
Yeah, but, is he in Saskatchewan? Or did he say Saskatoon specifically?
Saskatoon, yes, he did.
Yeah, Paris of the North.
Yes.
It's actually a beautiful town.
It really is.
It is.
All right, here's our next voicemail.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. It's Gloria and Paul from Calgary, Alberta. I'm originally from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We've been watching your podcast and we are listening to your podcast, and we absolutely love it. Keep up the good work, guys, and go take a shit in your hat.
Aw. Well, thank you very much. I love it that our Nova Scotian friends, no matter how far flung we are, we all tend to stick together. Blue Nosers are like that. So thank you very much.
Blue Nosers are some of the best hosers.
We really are. And interestingly, when my voicemail software writes a little transcript, and when somebody says, go take a shit in your hat,
right,
the voicemail software doesn't translate it. It it does star, 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 star in your hat. It's like it censors it.
It's so ridiculous.
Like, what, did a Puritan write this software? Like,
I know.
It's okay to write the word shit so I can see it. Like, I'm not offended by the word shit. And
so funny.
If you are, you're listening to the wrong podcast because we tend to say shit sometimes.
Quite often.
We say shit a lot. We say poop. And lately, Matthew's been saying pee an awful lot.
Yeah. I've toned down my swearing, though.
You've toned down your swearing.
That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome.
And we don't have any patrons or donut money donors this week, but that's okay. We know you love us anyway.
We do.
Thanks to all our patrons and donut money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.